So the #1 recruitment and retention and engagement tool is life-work balance. For a Generation X, they look at it and say, well, why do I have to have a bum in a chair and you can see the whites of my eyes? Why does that matter? Why can I not do the same work based on use of technology? If the job allows it, can I not go to my son's baseball game and then work to whatever the project is? I'll get it done. I just might do it on my own terms. And so I might work till midnight. I might start at 4 o'clock in the morning, but I can do that and I can balance my life and my business life as well. And so as long as it gets done, does it really matter? Are things we need to think about. Generation Y is also known as millenniums. And so we have Generation X who are having Generation Y kids, and we have baby boomers who have Generation Y kids, again, depending upon your age. And this is a generation that comes from an interconnected approach. That interconnected approach for them is they don't see the town that they live in. They don't see the state or the province that they live in. They don't see the country that they live in. Everything for them is interconnected on a global basis. Technology is not something that is separate from me. It is an appendage. It is part of how they live their life. This is the first generation born 100% in the information age. From the time that they were born, computers have been a part of their life. And that is where we start to see the crunch happening, because technology is moving at such a pace for one generation and at such a slower pace for another generation, and that's what's causing some of that divide. Let me ask I just want to talk to the baby boomer women in the room. Can you tell me what jobs, when you graduated from high school, what were the typical type of jobs that you thought you would be going into? Teaching? Secretary, nursing, teaching, motherhood. Now, I can ask that question anywhere in North America to large groups and small groups, and I will get those exact same answers. And none of us are that old. Do you think that any of us who know that we had basically, and of course there were outliers to that, but that we had basically 4 or 5 choices of careers, do you think we're going to say to our Gen Y kids, honey, pick one. You only get 4. Which one would you like to be? You're going to say to your kids, you can be anything you want to be. You want to go to the moon? You can go to the moon. You need 2 degrees to do that? You're going to get 2 degrees to do that. Whatever one generation lacks, it hands over to the next generation. And this is a generation that very much had lacked those opportunities for the boomers, and so with the opportunity that they give to their Gen Y kids is completely opposite of their own experience. This is a generation who has had access to everything, and everything has had access to them. You think about most baby boomers, you probably didn't get a passport until you were well into your adult years. In fact, when you graduated from high school, you probably were given luggage as your grad present. And you were probably told you weren't coming home. Remember that conversation? I don't care if you get divorced. I don't care if you're sick. Figure it out. And you figured it out. And people stayed in jobs that you didn't want to stay in, and they did, and they stayed in relationships that they might not have wanted to stay in because there weren't options and opportunities. Now you take that generation who goes out and has Gen Y kids and Gen X kids, and they're not going to say those same things. Something goes wrong, you come home. We'll work it out. I want you to have the experiences I didn't have. You're not going to get married at 22 years old. Here's a passport. By the time you're probably 8 years old, most kids have been someplace. Guaranteed they've been out of a state, for sure. And way beyond the borders and the perimeters of their local situation. So one generation misses something, gives it to the next generation, and then we have the audacity to call a generation entitled. You know, when people talk to me about the generations in the workplace and how entitled kids are, I usually have a tendency to say something like, and who's working with your child? Because if you think that kid that you're working with is entitled, somebody's got your kid and is working with them. And so we need to really think about how the generations got to where they've got, because we've all got kids in all of these different realms, and we've all got siblings in all of these different realms. You know, this is a generation that has a built-in BS detector, and that's what I like so much about them. They will research anything and everything, and that is very, very precious, very precious. And I like the fact that they do question, and they do push back. And you know, part of the reason that they do that is because they were raised by baby boomer parents who started the human rights, civil rights, and women's rights movement, who understand what confidence is. And unfortunately for most boomers, they didn't gain that confidence unless it was on a business card and they could say, here's my confidence because of where I am on the corporate ladder. They said to their kids, I want you to be outspoken, I want you to push back, I want you to stand up for your rights because I wasn't able to. And so we taught all of those things to our kids. And then we wonder why they come into the workplace and they push up against things, and then we push back when we taught them all of those great skills. You know that college has now become the new high school. You want to get a job as a barista, you're going to have at least a 2-year or 4-year degree to get a job in retail. That's the reality of where we're at. So you give frontline positions high levels of education. I think that's wonderful. But then with that high level of education comes an expectation as well. We can't do benefits the same way we did for different generations. We can't do training programs the way we did for different educated groups. Everything in our organizations needs to shift for that. And because of this 1 and 2 degrees that most Gen Ys will have, we also have a delayed adulthood because most of those kids are staying home in order to continue that education. The majority of Gen Y kids do not pay for their own education. You ask most Gen Xers, they either paid for it or they had paid for a part of it. And that's completely shifted. So now, and we have an entire generation who's gone out and traveled and seen things and had experiences, and that's absolutely wonderful because that adds to everything. The average age of a child living home today, and I'm glad you're seated for this, is anywhere between 26 and 27 years old. So, I loved it when they said that their greatest, what they want from you at the very end was to say, mentor me. I've got the education, I've got experience, I've been able to go out and see the world, and I've traveled to multiple different places. What I don't have is somebody to walk me through those very basics of business life and how that looks. And if you compare and make sure the person is very positive, a positive, high-performing employee who's an older Gen X or a baby boomer and pair them together with a Gen Y, they are going to rock. I mean, there's just no way they can't because they've got all of these great things in place. What they're missing is a mentor that's going to guide them along that path because they've had 2 working parents, and so some of those mentorship things that we thought were handed down in parenting weren't. The one thing that they are truly missing in this generation is a sense of community. And that is because their community is very broad and their community is global and their community is a lot by technology, but that face-to-face community piece is a gap that we're missing. So we have some generations that need to increase their ability for technology. We have other generations that we don't want to make sure they lose the ability to read body language and facial cues and voice tones and all of those places that those are not inherently within us. Those are learned competencies that one must practice all the time to be able to read body language and voice cues. And so we've got to make sure that we don't lose the balance between both of those worlds as we're moving forward. Right now, we're just in an uncomfortable pregnant stage. So you don't really look pregnant, but you really are. And so we're moving in between these 2 different generations of one migrating out of the workplace and one's migrating in. And what is that going to look like as we start to learn how to deal with technology in between all of that? I met this young man after speaking at a conference in December. I was in Seattle, Washington. He came up to me afterwards, and he was 25 years old, and he said to me, I just want you to know that I no longer use technology. He said, I realized a number of years ago that I was losing my ability to communicate with people. And so I did away with Facebook. He took himself off of LinkedIn. He no longer has a cell phone. The only way, you can't email him, the only way you can reach him, and he's done this now for 4 years. He's so committed to it. He is now, the only way you can reach him is by telephone. He doesn't even have a business card. He just puts his telephone number down on a piece of paper and gives it to you. And what's really interesting is I stayed at this conference for the whole day, and I was observing people, And I picked him out of a crowd. This was before I even spoke to him. I picked him out of a crowd as I watched him during breaks, before and after. I mean, he just stood out. His ability to go up to people, shake a hand, look him in the eye, and have a conversation with them was astounding, and I couldn't figure out what that was. There was something, and then he came up to me afterwards and told me this. So there's a balance between both of these things that we have to be able to find. You know what's really interesting is 98% of the flip charts from Gen Ys, you notice they didn't have a lot of heroes? They never have a lot of heroes. That's quite typical. You're lucky if you get one or two. 98% of them, though, will put their parents down as their heroes on that flip chart. It's the only generation that ever does it. And all of my research on both sides of the border says that this is a generation that is closest with their parents of any generation. They actually like their parents. They don't just love them because you're supposed to. They actually like them. They like going on vacation with them. They see them as their mentors and their coaches. They like having conversations with them, and they like to stay at home. They like to actually be in their own environment. So boomers who wanted to have a closer relationship with your children, you got it. You did it. You did exactly what you set out to do. This is a generation that requires a wide career path. If you don't tell them 5 years out exactly where they're going to, what potential ideas are out there for them that they can grow within your organization, they're not likely going to stay. They're going to go off to something else. And remember, this is a generation that has grown up with like what? I don't know, 400 or 500 stations. If you don't like the station, you just go click, click, click. You don't like the music? Click, click, click. Now, boomers, how many stations did you have? 3. Was it color? No. You probably remember the day the color TV showed up. It was an imprint. That was just so exciting. And all the other kids on the block came. Yeah. So now, in our short window of time, we go from this one part, we go from this one piece of pre-boomers and boomers remembering 3 televisions, not even having a television, having 3 stations. We go over here in this same room where we have 500 stations, an X amount of MTV, and every other type of musical station you could imagine, and we wonder why we've got a bit of a division going on, because all of that has moved so fast for us. In fact, for most boomers, you probably, if you were the youngest kid in your family, I'll bet you were the channel changer. You had to sit at the bottom of this thing and turn the knob. Yeah. You didn't have to, it didn't take much. It was only 3 stations. Like, you didn't have to work hard at it or anything. So again, we have these extremes that we've gone to. And so here we have a generation that says, I work to play. And they can, because they're still living at home with you. And that's one of the reasons they can. And I am glad of that, because I remember leaving home at 18 years old. And I don't remember not working since. And so, do you think that I sent my kid out at 19? I didn't. Because I wanted him to go and experience travel and fun and play before he did his education. So think about that sense of entitlement and where it comes from. What I want to do is show you a quick little video that has a profound effect on me, and I hope it will for you too. This was put out by ARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. They sent a request out to the younger generations, and they said, if you had 3 minutes and you could tell us what you're thinking, what would you want us older generation to know about your younger generation? And what I want to show you is the second prize winner. Now, when you watch this, you need to listen carefully, because a woman's voice is going to be speaking what you see on the screen. Okay? So if you can't read the screen, don't worry about it too much. You're going to hear her voice. Listen carefully.
I am part of a lost generation, and I refuse to believe that I can change the world. I realize this may be a shock, but happiness comes from within is a lie, and money will make me happy. So in 30 years, I will tell my children they are not the most important thing in my life. My employer will know that I have my priorities straight, because work is more important than family. I tell you this, once upon a time, families stayed together. But this will not be true in my era. This is a quick fix society. Experts tell me 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. I do not concede that I will live in a country of my own making. In the future, environmental destruction will be the norm. No longer can it be said that my peers and I care about this earth. It will be evident that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It is foolish to presume that there is hope. And all of this will come true unless we choose to reverse it. There is hope. It is foolish to presume that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It will be evident that my peers and I care about this earth. No longer can it be said that environmental destruction will be the norm. In the future, I will live in a country of my own making. I do not concede that 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. Experts tell me this is a quick fix society, but this will not be true in my era. Families stayed together once upon a time. I tell you this, family is more important than work. I have my priorities straight because my employer will know that they are not the most important thing in my life. So in 30 years, I will tell my children, money will make me happy is a lie, and true happiness comes from within. I realize this may be a shock, but I can change the world, and I refuse to believe that I am part of a lost generation.
How do we get that? You could do a search. You could find it quite easily on YouTube. Yes. So, ask all the Gen Ys. They'll help you out. Yeah.